Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are. Good evening if you are in Japan, like a few colleagues that I see here. People continue joining, but okay. So thank you very much for joining. Welcome to this second GERPISA International Seminar of the year. As you all know, this year we have focused our seminar series on the issue of sustainability. This is why we particularly welcome the possibility to include this topic. We are extremely happy to have an entire session on the issue of the circular economy. Today, we will talk about the circular economy in the automotive industry, trying to frame in particular a global south perspective. And for this reason, we're very glad, we are very lucky to have two presentations of two of our GERPISA colleagues. We have first Professor Adriana Marotti de Mello from the University of Sao Paulo. Hello, Adriana.
Hello, Lorenza.
Hello. Adriana is an associate professor at the School of Economics and Business at the University of Sao Paulo. She is also the editor-in-chief of REGE, the Revista de Gestão. And her research focuses in particular on issues related to circular economy, sustainable transitions, and the technological transformation in the auto industry. Adriana is a long-standing member of the GERPISA steering committee, like Professor Eike Prof from Duisburg, Essen, that together with our colleague Arne Jeppe will give the second presentation. Eike holds a chair in General Business Administration and International Automotive Management at the University of Duisburg-Essen in Germany. She is not only a member of the GERPISA Steering Committee, but also part of the PVMI, the Program on Vehicle and Mobility Innovation. She works together with her chair, and Arne is part of it. She works on several programs related to strategic and international management, especially focused on the transformation of the auto industry, including mobility ecosystems, business models, and the circular economy. We will have two presentations that I will introduce in a moment, and this will be followed by a discussion given by our colleague, and we're very happy to have you here, Andrea Genovese, Professor of Logistics and Supply Chain Management at the University of Sheffield Management School in the UK. Andrea has not only a long-standing expertise in supply chain management, but is also the PI of two large international research programs, one of which is Retrace, a project on realizing the transition towards a circular economy. So we're very glad to have you engaging with our presentation, Andrea. So we will start with Adriana, I continue on meeting people, I'm sorry, that will give a presentation taken from our work on circular business models in the automotive industry, where she highlights the need to include a specific focus in the literature, in the debate on circular business models, a particular focus on the automotive industry. So she makes the case for enlarging the sector focus, especially in relation to the needs of global South countries, and she will illustrate in particular a successful case
You want
of,
something to drink?
sorry, please mute yourself. A successful case of circular business model, that is the Renova Ecopeças in Brazil. Eike and Arne afterwards will give us another presentation taken from their work on the EV sales, boosting the EV sales by multi-life strategies in the global South, where they will make the case for not only increase the production and sales of electric vehicles in order to contribute to goals of decarbonization, but to complement this with other types of strategies, including multi-life strategies. In this case, they will build on the example of lithium-ion batteries, that, and in particular, how this can contribute to increase the accessibility of electric vehicles in the global South, where the issue of low purchasing power is particularly strong. And so how this can contribute to the sustainability and to the achievement of decarbonization goals, especially when we talk about contexts in the global South. I will stop here because I don't want to take too long, since we will have two presentations and I'm sure a rich discussion afterwards. You have about 30 minutes each. Then Andrea will follow with, let's say, 10 minutes discussion, 5 to 10 minutes discussion, highlighting, providing some comments, but also opening questions for the debate that will follow. I thank you very much for joining, and I leave it to Adriana.
Okay, thank you very much, Lorenza, for your introduction, and thank you very much for all the audience here. I am going to share my presentation. I don't think I will use all the 30 minutes, so it's good we leave some more room for discussion, probably. As Lorenza has already mentioned, I'm going to talk about circular business models in the automotive sector, especially regarding the view in Global South, and a successful case that is of a business model, circular business model in this sector here in Brazil, the case of Renova Ecopeças. I would like to thank you also, Mateus, Jesus da Ressurreição, he's here also. He's an undergraduate student that he conducted part of this research together with me. And this is the agenda of my presentation. I would like to present first some preliminary research that I have already presented in GRPISA this year, of a systemic literature review about circular business models and auto industry. And then I would like to discuss this case of the illustrative case of Renova Ecopeças. So circular economy and circular business models, I think it's no news for us here, have been gaining a lot of interest from academic community in the last decade. Here, just for an example of how steadily is growing the number of articles in both Scopus and Web of Science regarding circular economy and circular business models as well. But there is a lack of studies focusing on circular economy applied to automotive industry, as we can see. Only less than 1% of the articles in this research are related to auto industry and circular economy. Most of the academic, public policies and managerial attention regarding sustainability in auto industry focus mainly on impacts of use of vehicles, like emissions, fuel consumption, mobility, but there are a lack really of studies about the afterlife of products, of autos. What can we do regarding end-of-life vehicles? And this is a huge problem, especially in global south countries. We can say that there is a lack of models, structures, incentives, and cases that highlight how to plan, structure, and put in practice, really, circular business models in the auto industry, especially using the end-of-life vehicles. And this is a huge problem, as we can see for some numbers here. For example, approximately 900 kilos of steel are necessary to produce a single car. 12% of the global steel production are destined for vehicles. We can estimate at about 80 million tons of steel just to build vehicles. This is a lot. The average life cycle of a car is at about 12 years, 320,000 kilometers. And normally a car has, in average, 3 or 4 owners. These are data from the US, but I think this could be barely the same all over the world. And a car has many different materials in its composition. For example, different kinds of plastics, glass, fabric, aluminum, tires, batteries, lead acid batteries especially, and now with the electrical vehicles, ion lithium batteries. And this is a growing problem, especially on Global South, when we have lack of policies for destination of end-of-life vehicle, and also many countries in Global South, especially those that are not producers of automotive, or don't have a strong automotive industry, they become a destination to end-of-life vehicles from developed countries. For example, here in South America, Peru, Chile, they import used vehicles from Japan, for example, or even Paraguay, Bolivia, they import vehicles from the US, from Brazil. And the currently business model in auto industry is based on that take, make, waste logic. And and now I'm going to put some numbers about Brazil specifically to make a context for the problem. The circulating vehicle fleet in Brazil is aging. The average, I'm sorry, I can see here, the average age of the circulating fleet is growing steadily. We can say that the majority of autos circulating in Brazil, they have more than 5 years. And this requires more, of course, we have some problems, not only regarding emissions, safety of the cars, but this kind of old aging fleet requires more repair, more maintenance, and requires more parts. So in addition, in this problem of aging, the vehicle fleets is it's decelerating. So it's another figures to show how our fleet in Brazil is growing older and requiring more maintenance, more spare parts. And also, not only the fleet's aging, but the second-hand market, the second-hand cars market, the used cars market is particularly relevant in Brazil, especially in the last years, where we have economic crisis, increasing unemployment, in low credit available. So the market for used cars are estimated to be 5 times higher than the new car sales. So it's really an important market as well, a business opportunity to sell used cars in Brazil. And it's the only way for many, many households to have a personal vehicle. Is only buying a second-hand or sometimes third or fourth-hand car. So our research question really for this project is about how circular business models could be characterized in the auto industry. And we started with a systematic literature review and also with that illustrative case. A circular business model can be defined as the rationale of how an organization creates, delivers, and captures value in narrowing, slowing, closing, or regenerate material loops. This is a kind of a now classic definition from Nancy Bocken. So we can have these 4 strategies. Narrowing means that you use lower levels of new materials. For example, optimizing the manufacturing process. Slowing means when we have longer life cycles of a product. For example, instead of having a car only for 1-2 years and then replacing by another one, we can repair this car and own it for longer cycles. As we can already said, a car could run like 12 years with no problem. Or closing the supply chain using this, for example, using strategies like refurbishing or reusing parts in this in the direct cycle, or even regenerating material loops, like recycling material or regenerating energy, for example. So in these different strategies of circular business models, how can we have better opportunities for auto industry in those different strategies? So we conducted a research, a systematic literature review with the keywords circular business model, circular economy, and auto industry. And we found only 20 articles in this sample. And from these 20 articles, only 3 were related to circular business models. And interesting that many of those articles, the majority of those 20 articles were from global South countries like China, Pakistan, India. So from these only 3 articles, one from Agyamang et al. From Pakistan, the second from Agrawal et al. From India, and the third one, a literature review conducted in Italy. So from all those articles, not only the 3 regarding circular business models, we could find that when we talk about circular economy in auto industry, we are talking mainly about recycling, remanufacturing, and supply chains. And really, we do not have still a discussion, an academic discussion, a strong academic discussion on circular business models in auto industry. Only those 3 articles here. And they point some barriers and some drivers that we are going to explore a little bit further. So let me talk about the case of Renova Ecopeças. This is a very interesting case of a business model, a successful business model in recycling auto parts, reusing of auto parts for spare parts for refurbishing cars in Brazil. As I already said, used cars are a huge market in Brazil, and also the fleet in Brazil is getting older. That means it requires more maintenance, more repairing, more substitution of parts. And this company, Renova Ecopeças, they are focused. The main value proposition from this company is to dismantle and to recycle auto parts from vehicles that can no longer return to circulation. Wrecked cars, normally, like those ones, They are specialized in dismantling, parts recovery, and of course, the correct disposal of all those parts and materials that cannot be reused. It's an initiative from the largest insurance company in Brazil. That's very interesting, the story behind of this company. It was a project from this insurance company. The market, the whole market, they estimate for used parts in Brazil, for parts, maintenance parts, is about 20 billion $20 billion per year. It's a huge market. Normally, this market is dominated by OEMs and aftermarket parts producers. But there is a gray area of these used, dismantled cars parts. In the period since 2019, there was a five-fold growth in the revenue in absolute terms for this company, with an average rate of 100% per year. That's a lot. So this market's really growing in Brazil. And not only the market is huge, but also a regulatory change that occurred in 2014 in the São Paulo state, not in the whole country, but only in the state of São Paulo, the largest state in Brazil, the largest, the richest, and where we have the largest fleet of autos, and also the main auto producers are here in the state of São Paulo. But there was a changing regulation that it's calling the dismantling law, or a lei do desmanche, that inhibited illegal dismantling. According to this law, now all the auto parts, they must have a label that indicates the origin of that car, of that part. And since we have this law, there was a 30% reduction in car thefts in the state of São Paulo. Mainly, there was, as I said, there was this gray area, this illegal market of dismantling stolen cars. So with this law, they have really steadily allowing in this rate of car thefts. So the process is very simple. The car, normally the wrecked car is bought in a system of bought by Renova, by Porto Seguro. Those cars are classified, and so they are dismantled. All the hazardous materials are correctly destinated, and the parts, used parts from body, internal, external trim, mechanical, electronic parts are dismantled, classified. They receive a QR code traceable to the TANAN system, so they can really certify the legal origin of this part, and it's sold directly or online. So the business model really, as I said, has a value proposition that provides to sell used parts, used automotive parts with warranty and traceability for up 60% of the value, the price of the original part. So another value that is provided by this model is also the parts are cheaper than normally the traditional aftermarket parts. So they have really a very interesting relationship from Porto Seguro, the insurance company, the remanufacturing company like Renova, and waste disposal companies. Customers are traditionally remanufacturing and users, vehicle workshops, and also the companies that make the correct environmental disposal for the hazardous materials. The main source of revenue for this company is sales of the used parts, the sale of automotive scrap. What cannot be reused is recycled, like the steel, the aluminum, plastic, and environmentally correct disposal services for other companies that have to make this disposal. Like, for example, larger fleets of autos, they can hire Renova Ecopeças to do this managing of these end-of-life vehicles. The main costs are the cost of material, storage costs, and of course, the cost of labor and other operational costs. So just to closing here, we can have some main insights, okay? So the market for used cars and parts is relevant and it's growing, especially in Global South. But most of this market is still informal, and we have this kind of fringe gray areas of illegal activities. In Brazil, for example, as we already mentioned, at about 6 used cars are sold by each new car. But we found through literature and from these interviews from Renova and some other actors that there is almost no relationship with OEMs. An exception is one OEM operating in Brazil that had a contact with Renova to try to find out auto aftermarket parts, especially with this supply chain crisis that we are living since the pandemics. Normally, OEMs tend to see used cars and used parts as a predatory competition. And not only this in auto sector, but also another research that I conducted about electronic sector, we also found that OEMs, the brand owners like Samsung or Apple, they tend to see this used market, these spare parts, aftermarket parts, as predatory competition. But with the supply chain crisis could be an opportunity, not only to Renova, other players, especially to auto companies as well, the OEMs, to maybe rethink this strategy. And for example, Renault has announced a circular economy project that's called the Refactory in France, a very interesting project in remanufacturing and retrofit of autos. Not only this plant, but also they have a project for opening innovation opportunities for startups to growing new business models, new technological opportunities for circular economy in auto industry. But we still have some barriers, especially the lack of regulation, and in Global South, the bureaucracy and corruption sometimes inhibits the correct destination of wrecked vehicles. And we see some pictures I showed you here. Let me show again this picture. This is an actual picture of a car disposal site here in Brazil. You can see the quantity of wrecked, unusable end-of-life cars and motorcycles that are disposed in open air, contaminating the soil and water. This is a huge environmental problem in Brazil. Also, this picture here, we can see many cars just thrown into the wild, okay? That's a huge environmental problem as well. But we also have some concerns from consumers over the quality of these used cars and used parts. Sometimes these concerns are really reasonable, yes, to have how can we guarantee the same performance of the car, the same performance of these used parts, especially when we are talking about high performance and safety systems like, for example, brakes, suspension, brakes, how to really guarantee and provide the same level of quality of a new part. Also, we have a problem of taxes, increasing the costs for this used process. And as main drivers for this market, we have the price. As we already mentioned, it's about 60% of the price of a new aftermarket part. Also, the supply chain crisis that OEMs are experienced since the pandemic is, of course, an opportunity for growing these circular economy business models. And of course, the environmental awareness in market and for companies. So I hope I finished my presentation, and I once again want to thank Mateus for the support and conduct brilliantly this research. And thank you for your attention. I'm really willing to hear your comments from Professor Genovese and Heike and for the audience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adriana. Heike, I leave it to you and Arne, please.
You expect our presentation now, or you?
Yes, we will have the whole discussion at the end,
Oh, okay.
after the presentations. Thank you.
Sorry, I thought. So then thank you, Adriana, and good afternoon from Germany. Our presentation is on boosting EV sales, electric vehicle sales, by multi-life strategies in the global south, or the question whether this is possible. And I think I don't have to say much about us. It's just where we come from Duisburg-Essen in Germany. This is the share where I come from, and we are working on strategic and international automotive management. So this is the agenda. So I will first talk about the need for decarbonization, especially in the road transport sector, which is clear, just a slide. And I will show you the regulatory environment and the roadmap to decarbonization in different countries. And so the limited electric vehicle sale forecast in the global south, from which you can deduce that there is a need for this circular economy, especially in the global south, but you have specificities for electric mobility in the global south, and this requires multi-life strategies. And then we will come to characteristics of multi-life strategies that I would like to propose. And finally, we will show you economic potentials of these ecologically attractive multi-life products with the example of lithium-ion batteries. So coming first to the need for decarbonization, what you see here is the increase in global emissions, especially from the end of the last century and where we are now and what will probably come in the future. The transport sector is one part of this increase in emissions. If you see here the worldwide increase of greenhouse gas emissions in the transportation sector, between 1990 and 2019, it increased by 78%. Although we have this increase in fuel efficiency here on the right side by 30%, but this is kind of outweighed by the change in the vehicle models, like the SUVs and the pickups, that their share increases and the engine size increases. This leads to more emissions, and the average mileage is going up. So the global transportation sector grew steadily over the last years, and there was the emissions, and unfortunately last 30-year efficiency gains were substituted by customer behavior. So what is done against this? So there is a regulatory environment now with the Paris Agreement, and we're starting here from the global north, countries like the United States, like European countries, like Japan, they rejoined the Paris Agreement and they committed to zero net goal by 2050. In Europe, it's even faster. We have an ICE ban from 2035. In the United States, this is expected to be from 2050 on. In Japan, it's earlier, like that. If you look now at the global south, you see that Brazil and South Africa also joined the Paris Agreement, and they committed to this net zero by 2050. In China, it's 2060, and India 2070. Also, India has a plan to establish an own carbon credit market. So when you look of how can you reach these goals, there are different possibilities. If you look at the total CO2 emissions of OEMs here along the value chain, so from material production, usage to return. And you see that most of the emissions, they occur in the usage, like 70 to 75%. But there are also emissions from material, from production, and from return, from the end of life. And a shift to BEVs, which means increasing the usage, will not be sufficient to decarbonize the auto sector until 2050. So reductions need to be realized also considering material production and end-of-life treatment. So what can you do? The kind of roadmap to decarbonization would be first like green production, but this only starts in the medium term. More short term, it is the acceleration of the transformation to electric vehicles, and then thinking of these end-of-life strategies starting now. You need to start now, but it has a kind of medium-term effect. You cannot only concentrate on the vehicle sales, because there's a limited electric vehicle sales forecast in the global south. If you look at these numbers, they are now coming.
Eike, you have deactivated your sound. Can you reactivate your micro?
Yeah, is it any, do you hear me again?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Sorry, sorry. No. Sorry, here I was. Sorry, what I wanted to say is that global penetration of battery electric vehicles reached like 6% now in 2021, and it's projected to reach 41% in 2030. And if you start from the global north, Europe, which is here the second line from above, it will this figure is expected to rise even by 62% to 62% by 2030. North America, and especially Japan. North America is the 9.57%, and Japan is here below, is lagging behind. And South Korea, which has about the same figure as Japan, but it's smaller, so it's on its way. But if you look at the global south, yes, there is China. It remains the largest market for BEVs over here, with an increasing number of manufacturers, and they are increasing, playing an important role globally. But if you look at Brazil, India, and South Africa over here, they are lagging behind. They are just very, very low over here. So you cannot only look at the usage if you want to decarbonize in the global south. But what are the specificities of electromobility in the global south? There's low charging infrastructure. If you look here between Sao Paulo and Brasilia at the highway, there are only 3 charging stations. From Sao Paulo to Belo Horizonte, it's only 1, and to Bertioga, it's only 1. And on the right side, you see, if you compare it to highway kilometers, it's extremely low. This is the example of Brazil, where you see charging infrastructure is very low, and you could find the same examples in other countries of the global south. And you have a poor grid design and high electric vehicle prices. This photo of the grids was taken, I think, by Arne Jeppe, my co-author, who has been to Brazil just 2 weeks ago at a matching event for projects by the DRD. And he reported that electricity thefts and unreliable grids overload the power grids, that the power grids are very vulnerable, and so that this is not, so this is hindering the EV in the global south. And the purchasing prices of EVs are very high compared to the low purchasing power. So you see some starts of this electric vehicles, especially in public fleets over there. Looking at the low purchasing power, you can now here compare like India, South Africa, Brazil, and China. In this slide, where you can see the passenger cars per capita, and the GDP per capita. And you can see that at about $7,000 US dollar per capita, there is a kind of threshold. From that threshold on, there will be an increase in passenger cars per capita. So there will be a kind of mass motorization. It's not maturity, it's still away from maturity, but there is an increase. But India is very much behind, and like South Africa or Brazil, they are around this threshold. So the purchasing power is still low for mass motorization. And because electric vehicles are even more expensive, you really need low-cost models for electric vehicles. And even then, they are not sold over there. So what you could do, what could maybe help if we talk about circular economy, is that end-of-life strategies can mitigate these high costs of electric vehicles. That is the argument we would like to make, that multi-life strategies enable cost reduction across the life cycle and to make these electric vehicles more attractive in the global south. And what are these multi-life strategies? This is something that is a new trend in product, or a newer trend in product development, besides like more software in vehicles or decoupling hardware and software, is this extending the life of electric vehicles. And this is was a survey from Deloitte that the strategic relevance of those end-of-life strategies are quite high, but the internal readiness up to now is not so high. So they need to be pushed. And what are these multi-life strategies? What is the basic idea? So if we start from the left, what we usually talk about is the focus on a new product with R&D, production, then it's sold, and then we have after sales. That was all in the past. And with refurbishment and recycling, what we heard from Adriana before is that you take this traditional product, and after you cannot use it anymore in the way you did, you can refurbish it or you can recycle it. But both is designed to purpose of this first life. And what we are now proposing is a kind of multi-life application that you look for a second and a third use of this car. So this is not just refurbishment, it's repurposing or repurposing of these vehicles, so of these products. If you think of a car battery, for example, you can repurpose it to a battery that is used for photovoltaic systems in private households. And when it's not good enough for this anymore, maybe you can repurpose it for forklifters or so. But then you have to design these products for multi-life, and you have to find in strategies, you have to find a kind of partner network ecosystems. And when you have this, then you can think of business models as the business model of the orchestrator of this ecosystem. But this is still limited if you look, because you can only, multi-life can only work if you can change the batteries in the cars. And if you look at Ford, for example, the Ford Mach-E, this car, it is on platforms that were not conceived for an easy access and an exchange of batteries. So these special cells that are used there, they are attractive for recycling, but not for second and third use. And if you look at the crossover models here, there Ford has no influence because they are on the Volkswagen module kit. And this makes it difficult. They are not planned for end-of-life strategies, but at least they can be changed with an extra money. As a Puma model, again, it's adapted from an ICE platform, and it's not so easy to use it for end-of-life strategies. And if you take it together, you see that in the passenger car segment here, of Ford, 62% of the planned EVs to be sold in Europe would be suited for battery recycling, but only 38% might be fitting for these multi-life applications. So it's something that really has to be pushed, that is on its way, but up to now, yeah, there are limits. But there are also chances because the TCO over the life cycle decrease with these multi-life products. If you look here at the costs, you have the upper curve, the total cost of ownership. Yes, they increase with the duration of use for sure, but the residual value is decreasing, and you have the average costs per time. They are also decreasing the longer you use the car. But if you compare this is a single life picture to a multi-life picture over here, you see that the total cost of ownership, yes, they go up with the second life and with the third life, but the residual value will increase. And as long as the increase in residual value is higher than these additional costs, then you can take advantages of cost savings. And if you have these advantages of cost savings, you can give it to the customers and pass it through to the customers. And this makes the cars less expensive, and this might help at least to spread or to boost, or at least to spread EVs even in countries with lower per capita income. You see it here again. This is the economic potential from the second and the third life, and it makes electric vehicles more attractive. Why is it so? Just very short. It's because of digitalization. The whole thing of these multi-life strategies only function because of digitalization. Because if you have here the value chain of a product, with digitalization, you have a reduction in transaction costs between the different activities internally, and also external coordination with the partners you need for such a multi-life offer. So you build a kind of network which is between just giving something to the market and having something in hierarchy in your own company. And what you have, with digitalization, you can design ecosystems. I already mentioned ecosystems. These are kind of new network of partners that really align each other to a focal value proposition to give to the customer. So they come from customer information and give customers a focal value proposition. Here, the value proposition of this longer life with ecological and economically advantages. You need a platform. That's why we need digitalization, an operating model of the different partners, how they play together and where are the financial flows. Governance is very important, the rules, the regulations behind it. And the whole thing, the whole multi-life would only make sense if you have a joint value creation, as I showed before, if you really have a potential to get something you wouldn't get if you would just do single life products. And then you have, this is how you really design this multi-life scenario. On the one hand, you need modular ecosystems like modular partner networks for the first life. For the car battery, there are different players than maybe if you want to offer the second life, this photovoltaic battery, and the third life where you have this forklifter. So there are different players, but you need kind of modular ecosystems where you already have a vision and an idea who will come in the second and third life, and where you really, it's kind of discounting future ways of working together to the present, and where you design the modular ecosystem that is so that you can integrate the partners of the second and the third life. And from this, you can design the business model for the orchestrator of the whole thing. This can be the battery manufacturer, but it can also be a kind of the car manufacturer can do this. But you also need this modular product design, because this will only work, as we saw from the example of Ford, if the battery is open for repurposing and is designed modularly. And if we look now at this lithium-ion battery with its first life of car battery, then photovoltaic usage, and finally the forklifters, we tried to at least to estimate the economic potential. And therefore, if you want to estimate this, you need kind of assumptions about the differences between here the single life battery and the multi-life battery. And with different capacities, investments, initial investments, the duration of the life cycle, the running costs per year, the residual value for the three lives, if you separate them like single life battery, or if you integrate them at the right side, multi-life battery. And here, just for you, what are our assumptions? You can always discuss assumptions. It's just the first attempt to grasp these economic effects. Like extra costs for multi-life application, they are higher because you have more R&D and you have to make this modularization. You have these repurposing costs of 20%. running cost as share of initial investments. You have capacity after the first life might be, or we calculated with 70%, and after the second life cycle, like 50%. And then we had still different scenarios, whether there are in future state regulations or not. Scenario 1, no state regulations. Scenario 2, there will be subsidies and a regulatory frame for battery testing and repurposing. And scenario 3, with additional material taxes on critical elements for single life. So this is kind of making the market for ICE vehicles unattractive. Scenario 4, a strong additional regulatory measure favoring the deattractivization of single life products more than just these material taxes. And then no increase for multi-life products because of regulatory measures that tackle these costs. And if you look at this, you see the results of our estimation that even in the scenario 1 on the left side, where you have no regulations, there is a slight reduction of the cost of the total cost of ownership for the multi-life battery that is designed and used in the 3 lives compared to the sum of the single. The sum of the single lives. And with more and more regulation until scenario 5, this advantage of the multi-life case is even greater. So multi-life strategies offer an opportunity to reduce the price of electric vehicles by 7,000 to 8,000 euro per vehicle. That is not enough for the majority of the people in the global south, but at least this is one. It can be one part or one thing to reduce the prices and to boost, or at least to increase the sales of electric vehicles in the global south. And this you can see here. If you wonder what is multi-life indicator, this is just the different, it is just the relation between the TCO of multi-life to the TCO of single life, and it's going low, and it is decreasing. So this is this shows that the multi-life is getting more attractive because the TCOs are decreasing. And so if we come to the end, and the key takeaways, what we try to say is that achieving decarbonization under the strict timelines of the global regulations will require major efforts in product development, because usage, as I try to show, is not enough alone. And this can create a basis for developing these multi-life capable products that can boost, or at least increase, the EV sales in the global south, which have a very limited EV forecast. And multi-life products, they must be supported by multiple business models. We talked more, Adriana talked about the business models with this St. Gallner business model canvas or something like that. We could also develop it from the ecosystem. I started with the ecosystem, just trying to find in this multi-life, you need a kind of ecosystem, these partners that have to play together. And you first have to have the idea that these partners can create joint value. And only if this is the case, and that's what we try to show with this presentation, this is the case, only then you can think about the business model of the orchestrator, so his value proposition and his value architecture and his profit model. And the example of the lithium-ion battery, as I said, shows that multi-life products offer not only ecological, but because you have a longer use of the resources, but also economic potential. And that's was what we wanted to present. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, so thank you very much for this very interesting and relevant presentations. I'm sure there will be many questions. Now we give the chance to Professor Andrea Genovese to share his comments or first questions. Then we will get back to the two speakers and allow them to respond. And after this, we will open the floor to those of you who wish to share comments and questions for the two presenters. Andrea?
Thank you, Lorenza. Thank you for inviting me. It's really an honor. And thank you for the nice words at the beginning. How do you prefer me doing this? I mean, because of course I have a lot of points, comments, questions. The presentations were super interesting. So shall I start with Adriana's paper? We can go.
We are very flexible.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm sure that both speakers will appreciate the opportunity to engage with you. Okay, so you can either focus on each presentation or share common.
Yeah, let's focus on each presentation because I have taken a lot of notes. So if we have the time, I'll try to devote 5-7 minutes to each paper, and
no problems.
This will kick off maybe other questions. Yeah. Thank you very much, Adriana, for your presentation. Really a great case study. I think, you know, it really brought circular economy to action. Just an observation about, you know, the literature review that you performed, because you said, okay, there is a lack of studies looking at circular business models in the automotive industry. Maybe you were a little bit too restrictive with the keywords you used. Maybe if you want to extend a little bit the scope, what you can do is looking into related fields, such as, for instance, sharing economy models in the automotive sector. This is because, I mean, you know, normally you can find business models which can also be associated with higher R imperatives from a circular economy point of view. For instance, dealing with leasing initiatives, car sharing, carpooling, which are, of course, you know, presenting nice business models. Also, you might be interested in looking at concepts like servitization, product as a service, mobility as a service in the automotive industry, being these, you know, related issues which might have an impact on the automotive industry. And of course, I mean, you know, circularity in the automotive industry is very relevant, especially if we consider that once we buy our cars, they are parked for 92% of the time. So I wouldn't say the automotive industry is not really an example of efficiency, as you know, economists would say. And so absolutely, we need to identify good business models, especially business models that are appropriate to the context where we want to operationalize them. And I think this is a key point of your presentation, given that in Brazil, we have these huge second-hand car market. It makes sense to focus on this segment a lot, understanding how this can be made more circular, rather than replicating business models which are being developed somewhere else, which might not fit to the context. Very glad that you cited the paper from Brass and De Meglio, which has just been published in a special issue that I guest edited. And I have a bit of a problem with the definition from Nancy Bocken, in the sense that, you know, she talks about slowing down resource loops, narrowing them, closing the circle. But here I think, you know, we miss probably the first and most important imperative from circular economy, which is reduce, refuse. And I think this is very much relevant to the automotive industry. Do we need everybody to own a car? Especially now, you know, that millennials seem to be less and less interested in owning cars. So I think, you know, we need at least to question the relevance of all the set of our imperatives from a circular economy point of view. And yeah, of course, I mean, you know, this might have deep political implications, as somebody is pointing out, because this might question the growth imperative on which the car industry is built. But I think, you know, it is important at least to have this in mind when approaching circular economy in the auto industry. Then going back to the case study, I think, you know, case study is very interesting because of this partnership model that involves a very diverse set of stakeholders, the insurance company, which is very interesting also because it links to this social indicator of the decrease in the number of thefts in the area. What I think, you know, would be very interesting, especially if you're preparing this for a journal paper, is also going a little bit deeper into the supply chain implications. So where are the recovered parts ending up? Where is the company sourcing the vehicles from? Are they forging alliances with dealers? Are they collecting the cars themselves? Is there a sort of second-tier collector which works on a sort of gig basis? What sort of contracts do they have with these parties? It would be very good if you could elaborate on these aspects. And then also another big unknown when we talk about circular economy, that is uncertainty. How do they make sure that the facility they have created is fully operational, given that the flows when it comes to product returns are not certain? It's not like, you know, you're calling a supplier of yours and telling them, okay, do deliver us this amount of stuff because we need to keep our plant busy. So is this a relevant dimension for them or not? How are they dealing with uncertainty? So I would stop here, of course. I'm sorry if I've thrown too many things at you, but you can choose, I mean, a couple of points which you think are more relevant, and then we can keep the conversation going also privately or via email. Thank you.
Andrea, I would do like this. If Adriana, did you note down the questions you wish to answer? Let's also listen to comments for the second presentation, then we allow both of them to answer. Otherwise,
okay, good. No, yeah, thank you, AK, you know, for your presentation. I'm really glad that you brought up the data that you were showing in slide 5, because I think, you know, that is an extremely important point. it points exactly to something that is normally neglected when talking about circular economy, that is the so-called rebound effect. If we interpret circular economy just as a sort of techno fix and eco-efficiency fix, okay, we might need more resource efficient when we design our cars. However, if we keep selling more cars or even selling more resource consuming cars, such as SUVs, these gains that we make in terms of material efficiency, of fuel efficiency, also that was what you were pointing out, but this applies also to materials, are offset by the overall increase in consumption. One issue on which I don't agree with you, but I think, you know, this might be a minor thing, is blaming the consumers for this shift to SUVs. Mainly because, you know, we know why the auto industry is shifting to SUVs. They are massively more profitable vehicles. And of course, I mean, you know, within an industry which needs constantly to fight with falling profit margins, not to use a very old concept, but this is the reality. There is this trend, you know, to produce bigger vehicles that, okay, might be more efficient, but cost more in terms of materials to put together. And I think, you know, this awareness of the so-called circular rebound effect is a prerequisite when talking about circular economy. And thank you for bringing that up. And yet this idea, you know, of the multi-layer, multi-level production, I think, you know, is a great idea. I also have, you know, a PhD student of mine who is working on models to look into this. The only thing that comes to my mind is that but this is something that you have correctly pointed out, you know, this would require a complete redesign, not only of products, but also of the supply chain. And probably, you know, what we need if we want to go through this route, which I think, you know, could be an excellent solution, would be not companies, but boards of companies, clusters, ecosystems, as you called them, looking at this problem together, which could be a very good way also to fight against one of the problems you might have when you're trying to adopt this sort of multi-usage strategies within the same industry, which is the one of demand cannibalization. If we send the batteries to other related industries, we don't have the problem of reducing demand within the same industry, which is something that normally is associated with repurposing. So it is, I think, you know, a very good solution which could find potentially a lot of appetite within the industry. Two problems also here: the uncertainty of flows. How do we make sure that we have the availability of, let's say, batteries at the end of their first cycle of usage, exactly when they are needed in the second stage of their usage? This might be a problem that might require a lot of coordination, a lot of planning among the involved companies. That's why probably, you know, this idea of a coalition within the ecosystem that you painted is the way to go. And then also, you were talking about the applicability of this model in the global south. However, don't you think that, especially at the beginning, the impact of this model in the global south might be controversial, in the sense that, you know, it might create demand for products which are not yet there at the moment. For instance, electric forklifts. In order to use the batteries in the second or third cycle, we need first to create the demand for these products. So in the transitional phase, we might see some sort of controversial environmental effects, because we need a sort of startup phase. So probably, you know, this is something to keep into account when selling the model, in the sense that, okay, you need to create some capacity that is not there at the moment in order to exploit the full potential of the multi-use framework. But other than that, and I know this is quite a provocative question and a brilliant idea. So thank you, and sorry if I threw too many points at you. But it was just because the presentation was very, very interesting.
Sorry, please. Who's sharing the screen? It seems a political message. We may agree, but please stop sharing your screen. Thank you. Okay, so thank you very much, Andrea, for your inputs. I'm sure Adriana and Eike are eager to respond, so we will give you 5 minutes each, more or less, to tackle the first points that you want to tackle, but I'm sure we can still develop the discussion and the debate afterwards. So in order, so Adriana first, please, and then Eike, or I see, Eike, that you also have other members of your team in the seminar. So any of you that wants to contribute and to answer, please feel free. Adriana.
Okay, thank you, Lorenza. Thank you very much, Professor Genovese. You gave me really a lot of food for thought. I think, thank you very much. It was really interesting and very instigating your comments. So when you talk about the lack of studies, I think I agree with you, but it was maybe a problem with the conception of circular economy itself. I think the concept is really broad, and we chose, Mateus and I, we chose to focus on the problem of the end-of-life vehicles, especially those environmental material connected problem. What do we do with the cars, the end-of-life vehicles, that we have a huge problem in how to giving them a proper destination. And another problem, I agree with you, the sharing economy, the servitization and transforming cars into mobility services could be also, as is being seen by the industry as an opportunity to develop circular economy. But on the other hand, what we can see after at about 10 years of the adoption of these models is those models, they serve to sell more cars, as we see. We see a steadily growth, or at least a steadily will to growth in the market. So in Brazil here is, I think we have numbers of this, the adoption of these mobility apps as Uber or Didi or 99 cars, as we call it here, raised the sales of cars, especially for fleet companies that now lease the cars for the Uber drivers. So we are changing the public transportation to these mobility services. So we are creating another problem, putting more and more cars on the streets. But I agree with you. I think it's something that we have a knowledge in our research. And another comment, I think it's very interesting. It has to do with what I just said about questioning the circular business model from Bocken that I think I agree also that there is a very little to be said about this reducing the consumption. And I think for auto industry especially, I think the maturity of this discussion is really low. When we talk about, I was just taking a look at the Ecopeças papers. We discuss a lot about changing for ICE to electrical vehicles, for example, but we are all, the community, the researchers and the industry, we are talking about renewing fleet, selling more cars. For example, an indicator of success for the auto industry is the growth of sales, of course. And especially in global South countries, they are seen as countries where they can explore more the market. They can really grow the market and grow the use of cars. So that's for me, I think it's a great concern. How really to change the focus, to change the mindset in the industry, not for only producing more, but maybe finding new opportunity. And of course, we have the huge political problem about the industries really, especially in countries that are huge producers. They are really great job generators, really income generators. So it's really a very sensitive discussion, how really to introduce this matter of we need to reduce the consumption of cars. We need really to reduce the number of cars on the streets without harming this economic outcome that we have. That's a positive, for sure, outcome, this income generated by the auto industry, but how really to change it? That's why I was really concerned. And I really and appreciated your last comment about how to really giving more details about the supply chains from this company for Renova. I think it's very interesting because Renova is a part of this insurance company, and this insurance company, they have access, they own really, the insurance company owns the wrecked cars. And normally here in Brazil, the insurance company performs auctions to sell these wrecked end-of-life vehicles for those dismantling companies. And we have, regarding the uncertainty in demand, in supply, really, of these old end-of-life vehicles, that's really a problem. For example, when we study other supply chains, for example, for plastic, for packaging, for electronics, but for cars, we have the opposite problem. This Renova, they have really idle capacity. They could be processing much more cars they can actually are producing, because we have a huge problem of these old cars just being disposed everywhere. So we have the opposite problem here. We have a huge problem of a lot of end-of-life vehicles that are not dismantled and just thrown away in
Can I ask you something, Adrian? Just a curiosity. Please. I mean, are they getting paid to collect the cars, or do they pay? They pay. Okay. They pay.
It's the same company, of course. Goes from one pocket to another, but they pay in these auctions. They buy these wrecked cars. And we have really a huge problem about documentation. There's a lot of cars that are, for example, collected by the police because they don't have proper papers, they haven't paid the taxes, but those cars lies in a legal void, and they are just stopped in these huge places cars are just piled up there. So there is a huge opportunity, really, a business opportunity to explore these end-of-life vehicles that had no value for market, but certainly for this reprocessing could be a lot of value inside there. I think I have spent my 5 minutes. Thank you really very much. We can extend our conversation afterwards for sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adriana, Eike, or your team, all of you. You're muted. You're muted.
Maybe I can start and they can join in. So thank you very much for the comments, very helpful comments. It's not only Arne Jeppe, there's another person in my team, it's Max Eickhoff, and he's writing his PhD. He just started writing his PhD. He wrote his master thesis on it, and he's working on it together with Arne Jeppe, who is a research associate. Maybe they can connect with your PhD student. That would be a good idea.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, and thank you for your comments. So I didn't want to blame the customers for using SUVs. Although I often don't really see the sense of using SUVs in inner cities and in the urban jungle, but no, it's not. No, I didn't want to blame anyone. I only wanted to show the problem that these efficiency gains are really overcompensated by these larger cars and engines. The second one, the uncertainty of flows. This is a problem. Yeah, yes, for sure, you're right. I think if the whole, in the beginning, the problem is larger because you have to start everything. So if once it is in a flow and you really have a good kind of platform, you can monitor where the batteries are, what their state is, and then you can better match it. And finally, to the third one, yeah, there you're right as well. Maybe these multi-life solutions can push all three applications of multi-life products in the global south and help to get these more resource efficient solutions, not only to the first life, but also to the others. So what about Arne Jeppe? I see you. Do you have any
Yeah,
comments?
maybe I can join in. Thank you very much for your comments, and also thank you, Mrs. Poff, for your answers. I might add that with the global network, we can contribute to the global south, maybe focusing on other points in the global south first. The one point would be if we use these networks in the first world, maybe like Germany or Europe, the second life batteries would be much cheaper for the global south. So other projects like stabilization of the energy system and subsidizing diesel generators in Brazil, for example, to battery systems would be possible. So positive effect could be achieved with a global system for the global south. And I guess this is a very good point to start. Yeah. But thank you for your comments. Yeah.
Okay, so now we open the floor to all the others who may wish to intervene. You can raise your hand or write in the chat. We will read your questions. Open. I also have a couple of questions. Okay, Tommaso. And then Adriana, I suppose, has a question for the others.
Okay, there is, I will start by saying that this is a very big topic, and I think that the presentation highlights how big it is, because on the one hand, you can think about the life of a vehicle and I mean, we're talking about 12 years, but I think that for some vehicles, it goes up to 30, 35. We have countries in which you have a sizable share of the car fleet that is older than 30 years of age. And this means that what countries that produce cars do has consequences that go far beyond the first, second, third usage. And if you think Africa, for example, that Lorenza knows very well, Africa is basically using 15, 20, 25 years older cars than Europe has produced. So you receive 20 years later the consequence of the technical choice we make and so on. And also I think that is important to understand. I think it's very interesting that insurance plays a role in the Brazilian business model. There are actors in the auto market that are as big as the auto industry. And if you take insurance, the share of business of that insurance takes out of making an insurance for each car that is in the fleet is as big as the share the car producer do. So as an actor, if you don't consider new cars, we consider just the fleet as a whole, insurance are huge actors that can play a very important role. And we at Jarpisa, basically, we look at the top of the iceberg. And we have some people that have done work and going down in the layers, but this is just a forgotten realm. And what is interesting that we have, I mean, these are new businesses, but the gray area described by Lorenza is where hundreds of millions of people get their cars and repair their cars at the margin of the system. And you have a huge economy in North Africa that take old cars, repair, create parts, and so on. So when you think of circular economies, this gray area, you should not be taken away. They recycle, they rebuild, they reuse. And now we're moving into thinking about connecting these two words. This is the idea of IKE. You know, let's think when we produce the new cars, let's think about what happens to all the parts that are in the new cars and they travel. And the problem is that the car industry normally cares about the first 3-5 years of a car, because then it gets out of its business. The dealers do not repair cars that are older than 5 years today. They all go to other. So but the car industry, you need to force the car industry to think circular, otherwise they don't care. What they care is to sell a new car, and they have the 5 years business for their dealers to live with the repair and the insurance. And then it goes into another world, which is made by the repair shops. And then it goes into the gray area. I was very surprised in France, we're talking about Brazil, but in France, there was this type of garage that repair cars that have one person employee. Okay, so they statistically they appear as one person employee, and they've been growing dramatically during the last 20 years, and has become a very sizable part of the repair area. And basically, these people repair very old cars, and this is growing. The car fleet in France has taken 6 years of age in the last 10. So it's not just a phenomenon of emerging markets. The fact that the car fleet is growing while the sales of new cars is shrinking or is stable is a phenomenon that we see everywhere. So I think this is a big topic. At the same time, I'm wondering, when we connect with the electrification, of a problem of conflict between global south and global north. An average global north car now electric weighs around 2 tons. So you use a huge battery, and we know that these materials are rare. And so that means that if we look at the demand to meet those targets that IKE has shown in terms of lithium, cobalt, and whatever, it's basically going to take everything that is going to be produced, and nothing will be left for the global south. And at the same time, in the global south, maybe the way to go is lighter, not powerful cars. We see in China developing that with the new energy vehicle, but China is the only country in the global south that can get this supply of raw materials and guarantee it. It is an exception. And so I think there is also a conflict business model that we go back to this idea of why having SUVs, why electrifying SUVs. I mean, having SUVs is already stupid, but electrifying SUV is crazy. And I think this government regulation is a key element, because we're talking about customer, we're talking about car makers making profits. I've recently made a report that we discussed in our last seminar in France, and it would come out from the European Institute of Trade Union this month about the EU regulation for CO2. And I show that the EU regulation for CO2 is pushing that. It is not pushing car makers to make smaller, lighter cars. It has targets which are weight-based. So it's basically the regulator says, well, if you make bigger cars, your target will be less important. If you make lighter cars, I will make the life harder for you. So regulations are key. I think Andriano also talked about that. He said that this business model is emerging because there is a regulation in Sao Paulo. I think the state has to play a key role in pushing in all these directions. If you do not push car makers to think about end-of-life vehicles, recycling in a very serious way, they will not do anything about that. It is about creating these business model emerge because the states create both the opportunity, but also the obligation to go in this direction. I think we need regulation that take care of all these issues and connect the two worlds. Otherwise, I see that there might be very serious conflict between global north with these huge cars that require 90 watt batteries, and global south that would need just a small battery for the scooters, three-wheelers, and small cars. And there will be the advantage of the global south going in that direction for the climate change would be huge, but perhaps they will not be available because all the resources will be captured by these ridiculous huge cars. So we need to reconnect all these things. And so we were talking about bringing companies together. I think that we need to bring regulators, companies, civil society. We need plans in which all these different things are thought and not left by these kind of market-driven type of regulation. I see targets, let the market deal with that. That is not working. So I think that's is the different points I take out of this discussion, that we need to connect things. We need to think about global south and global north simultaneously, not let global north goes to electric cars, then they will go to global south. It doesn't work this way. It cannot work and it won't work. And regulations at all levels for all things that must be connected and thought together. It's not about business models, yes, but the business model should be integrated into a regulatory global thinking about these issues. And all of this is lacking, unfortunately, for the time being, even in Europe.
Thank you, Tommaso. I have Adriana, then Martin, then I will use the opportunity to raise two quick questions. Then we will allow you to answer and then see if there are others. Adriana.
Okay, I have I think it's more than a comment than a question to Heike and Arnie regarding whether I think it's very interesting, this idea of multi-life proposal to enable the adoption of electric vehicles in global south countries. But I think I see, according to the Brazilian reality, of course, because electric vehicles are not really an issue here for decarbonization due to our ethanol use, okay? We are focused in perhaps, and the auto industries here are focused in improving the performance of ethanol. So electrification is coming only through really premium SUVs, very expensive cars, but where there is a huge opportunity maybe to use this kind of multi-life strategy is for heavy weight vehicles like buses and cars. There is a company here in Brazil called Eletra, is a Brazilian company that produces electric buses, and they have as a model, as a service they provide of retrofit of heavy weight vehicles. So they are performing this, changing the diesel engine by electric engine for buses. I think this could be an opportunity because buses are a regulated market. So perhaps could be an opportunity for introducing and lowering the cost for batteries in global south countries as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Adriana. Martin, hello.
Hi. I have two short questions. And first, thank you for the very nice presentations. Maybe I start with Adriana. So because I'm in Japan, I am mostly aware of things that happen in Asia. And I can say from, for example, when I look at our foreign students, that although lots of them actually study environmental issues and even are active in developing fuel cells and other stuff, they all want to buy a car as a status symbol, right? And I am, let's say, Brazil is, I think, more developed than some of the countries that I'm familiar with. So my question would be, how are young people in Brazil, what's the attitude towards cars? Is it still like a status symbol, or is it more like in, let's say, the global north, that it's becoming less and less important to have a car? And for Heike, my question is also, say, from afar, it looks like the German car makers actually have an interest in those, let's say, multi-life business models. And some of them seem to enter into recycling, repurposing, and so on and so forth. So do you think that because you are closer to the actual cases, is that their attempt of, let's say, virtually integrating and taking out this insecurity that you would have when you try to build network-based business models? Or is that just like a misperception from afar on my part?
Thank you very much. I'll add the 2 points, abusing my chance to intervene, and then I will leave it to Adriana and Eike. Then see if we have time, we will collect another round of questions. So I have one comment, 2 questions. So one comment is linking up with what Tommaso and Martin raised. And it's about the idea of business models per se, and the need to contextualize business models, something that Andrea was also raising. I mean, business models often, are complicated to interpret, sometimes respond to demand, less often aim to create demand. And this is a problem for developmental purposes. Considering that demand patterns, as Martin is highlighting, are complicated. It wouldn't make sense, as Tommaso is saying, in some developing countries to have smaller vehicles that are more affordable. And I agree with Eike that the issue of purchasing power in the global south is central, but the demand patterns do not often follow what makes sense. In a sense that, for example, and I'm thinking of South Africa, I'm thinking of Brazil, and what Martin says, often, for example, and again, the need to contextualize, high and unequal societies see groups demanding vehicles that either are the rich people that can afford the SUV and buy the SUV, even though it's disproportionately unnecessary, or people that cannot afford a car at all. So there is a problem in many societies, especially the emerging economies that Eike and the colleagues have highlighted, of missing middle that affects demand and that affects also the viability of business models. So in this regard, I'm always up for putting things in context, and partly as Adriana is doing, otherwise it's very difficult to assess the viability. Second point is to Adriana is a question, thinking of the role of the state that Tommaso was also highlighting. Adriana, you are talking about business models, and you interestingly highlighted some arguments that work as drivers that can push towards circular economy and can justify support to circular economy, like the issue of quality, the issue of potentially formalizing the informal, whereby many of these activities often already occurred, but informally, the issue to tackle supply chain disruptions that we saw during the crisis. So my question is, not touching on what Bolsonaro was doing, what will happen after, but is there a public debate around this? Is there any public support? Is there any, what is the social political context in which these initiatives take place? Is there any support, given that the reasons why these are very interesting solutions are multiple? A last question, very short, to Eike and friends, knowing, working on emerging economies and what were called BRICS before, what was the rationale behind analyzing, in particular, Brazil, comparing targets in China, in Brazil and South Africa? South Africa is a super small market, and in particular, the rate of penetration of electric vehicles can say very little, because it's not only about purchasing power. There's an issue of energy crisis in South Africa that is a huge constraint to the penetration of electric vehicles. The charging infrastructure will hardly ever work. And there are issues related to inequality, quality of the roads, many other elements that affect the penetration and that make the future prospects very gloomy. So why did you exactly include South Africa in this comparison? A bit too much pressure on South Africa, I felt, but sorry. I invite the speakers to respond to these inputs in the order you prefer. If we want to start from Ike and colleagues and then go back to Adriana, perhaps.
Okay.
Okay. So thank you for the comments. Sorry, thank you for the comments. The first one from Adriana, I think, yes, you're right. You have this methanol and this fuel flex, which Brazil says is still resource efficient, although you grow the sugar, and you could use the land for other things, but you're right, you could also look at these lorries or larger vehicles. Then you need larger batteries, and you could use them for, and you could think about other second and third applications, maybe to buffer the electricity for houses or for whatever. So there are a lot of different applications I could think of with them. So it's a good idea to think not only to passenger cars, but to other vehicles as well. Yes, thank you. And yes, that's right. Our German car manufacturers, they are not very good in cooperating, and many corporations failed, but they have to learn it. So they start to cooperate with energy suppliers, for example, so I think, yes, it will be some way for them to go, but I don't see an alternative for them just to please. They have to cooperate in these ecosystems, and I think they are a little bit on the way. And the last one, yes, we thought it could be, Lorenza, it could be an idea for global South countries, but you're right, you have to look at these countries very specific, and you cannot just say the global South. So the countries are very, very different, and you need to go much more in detail, as we saw from the comment of Adriana as well. Yes, you're right. I don't know whether
yeah, I can just underline it. We need, in this perspective, we need to think outside of the box. So yes, you got the ethanol fuel, which came in our mind when we were in Brazil too. But of course, you need to be able to get the diesel generators out of the Amazonas gebiet or Amazonas area, which are very strong polluting there. So there would be a chance to use batteries. They don't have to stay in cars. That's the advantage. And the other advantage is you can reuse the cars in other third, like global South countries, if you put smaller batteries in this and make them cheaper. So they are also available for like countries like South Africa, because the battery is the most expensive part in the battery. And to you, Tommaso, you're totally right. If you just focus on getting and producing everything in just producing car batteries and taking all the resources, this would be a big problem for the global South. But with our multi-life approach, you are producing car batteries, a lot of car batteries, but you are then less producing other batteries, like for household storage and forklifters and so on. So you are taking these production out of the market and enforcing the other. So the general level of resources will stay the same or getting lower. So the ramp up phase, yes, you got a lot of resources put to car batteries, but if the system runs, the resources will be cheaper because there is not so much demand, and you can spread them out for second life applications or cheaper batteries in the global south. So the ramp up phase, yes, but then it will stay low. So thank you.
Thank you, Arne. Adriana, we go back to you.
Okay, thank you for the questions. They are very interesting. I will start with the Lorenza's about the social political environment. It's much lighter here in Brazil now that the extreme right is going to the past, hopefully. But there is something that really steadily here in Brazil is the power of the auto industry in the regulatory environment. Since the 50s, they are really strong in pushing regulations and policies. For example, for the road construction in Brazil, this policy was based upon the requests of the auto industry to sell more heavyweight vehicles instead of trains, for example. So this discussion about these end-of-life vehicles is really out of sight for the political agenda. It came through the problem of urban security, through the insurance company that regulation that's now in the state of São Paulo, is valid for the state of São Paulo, was really pushed by Porto Seguro, that's the largest insurance. To lower their costs, they really made an effort to the government pass this bill about this labeling of the used parts that really lowered the cost of insurance, lowering the thefts of car. On the side of the production of cars, all the policies that we see, they are go in the direction of renewing the fleet, selling more cars, especially now with the third government of Lula. We see really a stronger voice for the metal workers union. And they are trying, of course, they are trying to preserve their jobs. So perhaps we have to put into the discussion how to make newer jobs for these metal workers inside this new way of producing a new business model, for example, of refurbishing cars for resale, like Renault is doing in France. I think it's a very interesting idea that could be inside here for Brazil. And regarding Martin's question about how young people see cars here in Brazil, we have really a situation that I think is similar to the United States. In urban centers, you can see the youngers are really using much more Uber, and they don't want to drive because it's really costly to drive, to park, and they cannot drink and drive anymore. But if we go into the countryside in Brazil, really there is a huge demand for SUVs as a status symbol, even for youth. So I think we are in a kind of just similar to the United States in the matter of this youth behavior. That it's good for the auto industry to sell more cars, especially more these huge SUVs, but not really for the environment, really. And the last comment for Tommaso, I think it's very interesting to use the regulatory power in order to kind of reduce the size of the cars. I think there's a lot to do with the idea of reducing consumption, really, in these business models. But we know that the problem is the power of the auto industry, the asymmetry of power the auto industry has in order to pushing regulations, and this is something that we have to deal. Perhaps from I think only maybe the European Union has power enough, perhaps, to push a kind of regulation like that, and then maybe spread for other countries, other regions. And thank you very much for the discussion. It's really, I think we could discuss for hours this subject. It's really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Adriana. Thank you all. I think, yeah, I agree that we could continue this very interesting discussion. Unfortunately, we have approached the end of our slot, so I can't launch another round of questions. But again, this GERPISA is a network. For those of you that just joined and that don't know the network, is a network of people that come from very different disciplines on common topics. So there are always good, interesting debates. We also encourage, of course, to continue this conversation, to create new connections, as apparently here could emerge between your universities. So we hope, yes, we encourage you to stay in touch. We hope you enjoyed, as we did, this interesting presentations, this interesting debate. We thank again the two speakers. We thank Andrea Genovese for engaging with our speakers. We thank all of you for participating. We still have, with GERPISA, we still have 2 appointments before Christmas, one in French on the 2nd of December, another one on the 16th of December. You find all the details of our next seminars on our website. We will send you some reminders and information. This is all. Thank you very much again. Enjoy your weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
And thank you, Lorenza, for organizing the whole thing.
My pleasure.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. See you.